Recording now.
Hi everyone, my name is Dee Mann. I'm the Student Placement Manager for all of the ACAP schools, and I'm here today with Sabina Raybold, one of our educators.
Hey Dee, thanks for making the time to talking about placement and placement experience for students today. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, sometimes students run into difficulties at placement, and I wonder if you could say a few words about what happens, how come?
Yeah, so one of the major difficulties that some of our students experience, not all of them, is that most of our students are mature age, so they've worked and many have achieved quite high positions. So we have many people who've been managers, directors, or in a senior role, a supervisory role in their workplace. So then the students come to ACAP where they're students. They're not managers or supervisors. And at times on placement, a student can find it difficult to make the adjustment. They're so used to being in the role of manager or supervisor that it can be quite difficult to take a step back and to bring a beginner's mind to placement, to actually recognise that they're not an expert by any means. In fact, they're a student just there to learn. So at times we have students who can overstep the mark, who blur the boundaries between the role of student and the role of supervisor. We sometimes have had experience of students being quite arrogant about the amount of knowledge that they have. So now that's not to say that students don't have knowledge. Many do, and many have many years of experience of working with clients or working in that supervisory capacity of counselling colleagues or employees, etc. So it's not to discount that students are bringing experience, but it is to say that sometimes that can lead to a student just missing the boundary between the role of student and being arrogant, superior, or judgmental of the agency. And that can lead to problems. Some of the other issues that we have, I think of them in categories. So skills can be a problem. We have had students who arrive on placement having passed all of their skills unit, but having never worked with someone who wasn't a fellow student. And working with clients it's a big change, a major transition. And some students don't adjust as quickly as we need them to. So there have been occasions when we've suggested or gone ahead, had to cancel a placement because the student's skill level wasn't satisfactory for placement. In those instances, we bring the student back in for retraining, and we have some workshops that we get the students to go through before they go back on placement so that they'll be fine when they get there next time.
So it sounds like there's a lot of support for the student, even when there are difficulties or challenges. The student has a lot of support from you and your team to succeed in their placement.
Most definitely. We don't throw you to the wolves. We have a very supportive team around you. So the support, our supervisors are very supportive people, particularly those who've been working with ACAP as our partners for a long time. They have great experience and have supported students through all sorts of ups and downs. They're good at giving feedback, and they know to give feedback early so the student has a good chance to adjust whatever it is that needs adjusting. We also have the clinical supervisors who Pol has spoken about on another video. The clinical supervisor is there to support our students, so if someone's struggling with skills, they may be able to make some recommendations to the students as well. And we have some workshops and other teaching learning opportunities for students who are struggling as well. We hope to expand the placement preparation workshop so that at the moment we have perhaps 150 students who might be able to do that in a term. We hope to expand that so that more students can participate as well. But we also want to use these videos as training opportunities as well.
So you really want the students to be as well prepared as possible, even before they step into their first day at placement, so they know what to expect, what is expected of them, who they can go to for guidance and information.
You want it all very clear for them.
And how to conduct themselves as a member of the team, albeit a student.
Yeah, very
on a
important.
student level.
Very important. So one of the things that students can misunderstand is thinking that placement is an opportunity for you to start practicing your skills, right? And then to learn while you're there, so that maybe halfway through the placement or towards the end, then you would start working with clients. It's not like that at all, right? We expect our students to commence working with clients very quickly on placement, and in fact, you must have clients by the end of week 3. And if that's not the case, then we may need to look at whether or not you're ready for placement. So it's students do need to be primed and ready to work with clients. So if their counselling skills are not up to date, we'd have to highly recommend that they attend a counselling skills workshop to brush up on those skills that they might not have done a unit for a while.
And
so that
of course,
would be very important.
If I can just say, of course, the client too, they're not sitting with the student counsellor thinking, oh, they're just a student, I'll cut them a bit of slack. They expect their counsellor to be up
professional.
to scratch. Yes,
Absolutely. Yeah. Now that's not to say, obviously students have the opportunity to observe and to co-counsel, to learn for the first couple of weeks. But within the first few weeks, we would expect them to be ready to start move towards their own clients. So
quite
that's how that
daunting
would
to
work.
begin with, but
Can
it's so
be.
good to know that there is such a team approach and that they're well held,
Yeah, that's it.
both from the placement perspective and the ACAP perspective.
That's right. So there's a placement, pardon me, placement supervisor to support them. There's the other team members at the placement. There's the clinical supervisor, and then there's the ACAP placement coordinator, who is always able to help with any issues that might arise that a student's unsure of how to deal with. So other things that can go wrong, so I've mentioned attitude. It's really, really important that a student bring a beginner's mind and a beginner's attitude to placement. When I say beginner, I don't mean no skills, no experience. They're very skilled when they come to placement. It's just that line between I already know what to do and I'm here to learn what to do. I think that's what students need to make sure that they're approaching as a learner.
And as a supervisor, one of the things that I often talk about is that it's not the students' values that matter, but it's the values of the organisation and the policies and procedures of the organisation that need to be adhered to. So even if their own personal opinion is different, that's not really primary.
That's right. In fact, they almost have to give up their own personal opinion. So it's quite common in a placement for a supervisor to speak with a student and address something that the student is not doing to the supervisor's standards or liking, and a student may completely disagree with that. And it's important that you understand that as a student, it's not that you don't get to disagree, it's that you must be very appropriate in how you question a supervisor. So a supervisor may be saying, I don't want you to, I don't know maybe there's something that's happening with clients in a casual or social sense. A supervisor may say, you're being too casual, I don't want you to, whatever the case may be. And a student might think, but this is the best way to build rapport. This is how I do it. This is what I'm like. I'm a casual kind of person. I like doing it this way. And what's really important is that no matter what the supervisor says, the student firstly accepts what the supervisor says as valid and important, even if they disagree with it. They then need to be able to reflect on why the supervisor said it and what the supervisor's intention was when they communicated that to the student. They then need to look at now that I've accepted that it's valid and it's correct, how am I going to demonstrate that I've accepted that in my interactions with clients from now on? So that change is very important, and it is an area that we've had many, many placements break down over. Supervisors say, I've given the students feedback, I've given them a lot of feedback, but I find that they don't integrate the feedback and I don't see the change that I've asked for. So a placement can be cancelled if the student has had the supervisor has tried on 2 occasions to communicate that to a student and the student hasn't altered their behaviour.
And that can be quite devastating when that happens.
It can be, absolutely. The other thing that I'm just got some ideas to pass on to students about what else can go wrong. Teamwork is really, really important in an agency, and we have had on occasions students who didn't do that. They isolated, they didn't spend time in the common areas working with the team, they weren't social, and for our shy or less, I can't remember
gregarious or outgoing.
That's right, students. That's a real challenge, but it's actually important because the thing that most students need to appreciate and makes the world of difference when you're working in an agency is that the number one reason why agencies accept student placements at all is because they're looking for their next employees. Now, the agency is noting how you fit with the team, how well you interact, right? They're not looking for gregarious, outgoing people. They are looking for people who work well socially with their current team, because that's who they're going to employ. So that's a really important one as well. We have had at times students who haven't behaved professionally. So for example, their dress hasn't been appropriate. We had a student who took his shoes off every day when he got to the agency, and despite repeated corrections, just said that he didn't like wearing shoes. But unfortunately, it's not acceptable in a professional environment as their placements are, or in a counselling environment, a supportive environment. We've had failure to follow instructions or policies. It's almost instant dismissal, unfortunately. These can be very serious incidents, or where something's happened with a client and the student has thought they were doing the right thing by doing whatever they did, but it turns out it did not follow the policy or procedure. So it's really important that our students bring themselves up to date and are aware of what the policies and procedures are in their agency so you can follow them. That would be an important one.
It's one of the things that I suggest students do, if possible, even before they start at the agency, to familiarise themselves with policy and procedure.
Yes, I would agree. Absolutely, it's so important. Confidentiality, of course, is very important. Now, the other thing that happens along with that is that sometimes students think it's okay to joke about a client, or to make fun of or belittle a client, or to be judgmental. And as these are student counsellors. We have very high expectations of a counsellor's behaviour in the workplace at all times, and really not only in the workplace, but as a student goes through their course here at ACAP, we do expect to see a transformation of that student into a professional counsellor. And one of the things that a professional counsellor embodies is unconditional positive regard at all times. So students can sometimes forget that and be joking around with each other and be overheard by a supervisor making judgmental or belittling comments about a client, and that certainly doesn't work. We have had students who've breached boundaries that one wouldn't expect a student to breach, but sometimes there's a lack of awareness. A student offering to see a client privately outside of the agency, that's a complete no-no, of course. The contact that students have with clients must be strictly within the boundaries of the placement and must not take place outside of the hours of placement or the duration of the placement. That's a really important one. We've had, unfortunately, about 3 or 4 incidences in the last few years of students using what I guess we would term new age, not really therapies, but new age approaches on placement. For example, palm reading and crystals. And unfortunately, these are not evidence-based and these are not what's taught at ACAP. So it's really important that even if you have some expertise or some training in any alternative therapy, such as those, that you do not bring those into the placement. It's very important that you stick strictly to what the agency does, the services and the modalities that the agency uses.
Because that's the contract, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And there is a contract with the agency, and students have a contract with ACAP while they're on placement of how they will behave and the work that they will do while they're on placement. What else is would be important? I've mentioned listening, accepting, reflecting on and integrating feedback. So important. It's so important. In fact, it's probably one of the key learnings that all students must do while on placement and must demonstrate.
And I'll be doing a little video on that.
Oh, great.
So that'll be available.
That will be really helpful for students. The only other thing I can think of that is important to know is that sometimes a placement is cancelled through no fault of the student or of ACAP. There's a situation with the agency that can't be helped. For example, we've had supervisors who get ill and who can't continue with placement. We've had placements that looked fantastic when we first vetted them and made sure that they met all our requirements, but they're turn out to be unable to provide clients. And so we've had to cancel placements because there's not sufficient work there for the students. Of course, there's no penalty to the student in that case at all. We simply have to withdraw you from the unit. But it does mean that you're then delayed and you'd need to start a placement again later. But these things can happen. Sometimes, now this is an important one, counselling students in particular often come to counselling, to ACAP, because they've had an experience with a counsellor in the past that has really touched them, so much so that they've decided that that's the career that they want for themselves in the future. That's great, but it also means that many of our students have experienced trauma in the past. And when they come to work on placement with a client, that trauma can be triggered. So we've had to ask students, or recommend or insist, that students withdraw from placement because they're being triggered by what's happening, and that means that they're not ready for the workplace or for placement. So we would withdraw them and request that the student seek counselling and monitor that to make sure that the student is getting help outside of ACAP until their counsellor feels that they're now ready to work with clients again. You know, you might like to say a bit about that.
Well, it's not just a benefit of benefit to the client, it's also self-care.
Absolutely.
Looking after ourselves, and it is quite common that a client brings in a story that is activating or similar to our own stories, and so it is so essential to self-care and to seek therapy ourselves if needed, and certainly also clinical supervision helps in that process. So yes, I think it's so very important that students are guided and helped to take care of themselves and their own issues, so they can be clear and available to what their client brings to them.
Yeah, in fact, it's so important that if you're watching this video and you have trauma or an unresolved issue in your own background where you're concerned that you might be triggered if someone was to bring up an issue like that, then we would strongly recommend that you seek professional counselling now, so that when you get up to your placement, that's not an issue for you. Some students, unfortunately, think that they just need to get through the course. We just need to get everything done. I just need to get that placement finished and over and done with. That's not the point of placement at all. That would be a real wasted opportunity. Placement is where you get to bring together all of the development, growth, training, knowledge and skills that you've had over the duration of your course and put that into practice. But if there's something that's incomplete for you, that's getting in the way, it will show up on placement. It will show up when you're working with clients. There's no doubt. You can't fudge that. It's going to show up. So I really recommend that you take that seriously and get some support and help early, so that by the time you come to your student placement, you're able to operate as a professional and not being affected by being triggered as much.
That sounds like a really good place to stop, unless you have anything else to add.
No, I think that's covered the main
points. Yes, very comprehensive. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks.